normally what I do in this process is I walk through the store from the bottom up and look at the products in detail and then move up and all sorts of things. But I'm not going to do that for your store because I don't think this is an audit. I don't think this store is running. I could be wrong in that, but I get the feeling that this is a new store that you're building, and you're trying to figure out, what to do to finish the build. So that's the view I'm going to take at it, right? And I apologize if I'm wrong in my assumptions there. So the first thing, let's talk about what you're selling. And it's a single product, which is a advantage for you if you're going to keep it as a single product right now, because it makes things easier to do, right? A lot of stores have to spend time figuring out how they're going to have 100 products and help the customer choose the right one for them and all that stuff. If you've only got one product, it's a nice consistent message you're going to be delivering to people, not instead of trying to get them to make all these different choices, right? So there's an advantage there. While you're just still one product, there's nice, tight, easy website to build. All right. Now, let's talk about your product, which is this supplemental super powder, 100% freeze-dried microgreen, turnips, collards, broccoli, radish, kale, blah blah blah. No additives, shelf stable. All right, all that good stuff there, right? The only reason I know that is because of that photo, because on your product's page, there is no text whatsoever other than Simplement, which is spelled wrong. Well, that must be on purpose because it's spelled so wrong. So I don't know, probably a branding term or something you're coming up with, Simplement or something like that. But there's no description of what the product is, no value prop at all, right? So what you have to think about is, what is your store's brand going to be? Right now, I'm going to take this mostly microgreens, and I'm going to call that a product name. I'm not going to call it a brand. Now, it may end up being your brand, but I don't think it is, right? So, and I'll explain why I say that, right? So, mostly microgreens looks to me like it's this product, right? Because it's got lots of greens in it, right? It's got kale and broccoli and that kind of stuff. I could see like the next thing you roll out is, yam-based whatever, right? Or some other supplement, some other nutritional product, and that's going to have its own name. So I assume this mostly microgreens is a product name, although maybe you're thinking the product name is supplemental super powder. I'm not sure. So, and then your domain, thriveblends.net. .net is a negative. But if there's a lack of consistency in what the brand is, right? What is your brand? So I think the first thing you need to figure out is, what is your brand? And as you're figuring that out, things you're going to be thinking about is, what is the products you're selling? Who are you selling it to? What is your differentiator? What is your value prop, right? What is your value provided to customers? And how are you different from the competition? And all those things are going to help you build out your brand, right? And I'll give you a real example on my website. Jade Puma, I could have named my agency anything, right? But, what I said is, hey, I'm here to accelerate your Shopify business. So if you're on BigCommerce, right? If you're on WooCommerce, you're in the wrong place. We help Shopify store owners, right? So you want to be clear who you are, what you're selling, who you're selling to, what your value prop is. And on your home page, what I like to do in this section here, what I call the "You Are Here" sign, which is just your quick and easy value prop. And let's just look at a couple of my clients. Like Healing Foam Foods is a great one. Nutritious snacks. Great tasting snacks made using raw food techniques. So, they're nutritious, right? So they're healthy, they're good for you, and they are using the raw food techniques, which is a niche of the nutritious snacks thing. So really focusing in on their differentiation, right? If we look at ReptiChip, premium coconut substrate for reptiles and amphibians. So they're selling substrate for your snake's tank, your turtle's tank, but it's made out of coconut, and it's meant for reptiles and amphibians. It's not meant to be like a mulch for your plants and those kind of things. So being really clear on what it is they do. Let's look at the Bixby chocolate here because it's open. The finest chocolates since 2011, right? And here they're in Maine, so and they're in Rockland, Maine, and their factory is actually right here in this photo in the background. So we show a photo of Maine on there and their chocolates. And we also have Emerson open, so let's look at theirs. America's Knife Company, established in 1979, made in the USA. Right? So you can see what they're doing there is they're trying to put a stake in the ground for their brand. It has nothing to do with their products at this moment. We're talking about the brand, right? Here's what we are, here's who we're selling to, here's what we sell, and here's our differentiator. So I would recommend that you sit down and figure out what is your brand, what is your differentiator. And if you're going to be one product forever, it might stay the mostly microgreens. If it's going to be, different products over time, you want a brand that's a good umbrella for all of them. Now, if I come to a site that says mostly microgreens, and then I see this purple pink coloring going on, it threw me for a loop the first time I opened up your page. I was like, is there something wrong, right? Because it didn't make sense to me that organic, fresh, no additives, shelf-stable food would be associated with this bright artificial coloring that I see going on. And that's where it comes back to when you build your brand, you have to think about those things. Let's look at Bixby chocolate, right? What we're doing here actually is this is a conscious decision of there's two different blues. This is the dark blue. There's a light blue. There's the light blue. You can see it there, and the red. And it's meant to be symbolic of sailing, like sailboats, because they are on the harbor and the coast of Maine, right? Rep to chip, right? They've got this brown color here, like their coconut, right? So the brown and then the orange is a highlight off, to brighten up the brown. But the brown is meant to remind you of coconut, which is the basic ingredient of their products. And if we go to Healing Home Foods, you see they have a whole set of saturated colors, but they all feel natural and organic. Like this is tomato red. I forget which one of their foods was the one that brought this color together. But you can see they have this consistency to these different colors they've got throughout their site. So those colors support the brand and the value prop message of great tasting snacks made using raw food techniques. We wouldn't want to see artificial looking colors on that page. And that's what I look at when I see here is like the colors don't make sense. And also the execution of the colors isn't consistent, right? Look at this footer here where there's no white on the edge, but here there's a lot of white on the edge. So the way the gradient's working, the top and bottom don't look the same. And then the mostly microgreens, right? Text-only logos are absolutely awful, especially if the text is literally just text, which is what yours is, as opposed to an image or hand drawn. And a real example, right? So Microsoft is text. However, when we get to it, right, their letters, it's put along with what used to be the Windows logo, but is now the Microsoft logo, right? So they've got a little image with it, so that that's the logo. Because literally, when I looked at yours, I didn't know if that was the logo or if that was a message or anything like that, right? So you want to have something that's like it's clear this is our logo, and that is not clear at all on this one. Especially when we look at it on mobile, and that text wraps, right? So it breaks your brand name, which is supposed to be your brand name here, in half, right? That's you definitely don't want that happening. So I would highly recommend creating a logo, and it's a lot cheaper to have happen than you might think. Instead of having, because having a text-based logo just looks like lazy, right? And what you want to do is you want to show the extra effort, because if you show the extra effort in a logo, it means you're putting the extra effort in the product also, right? And people, whether they sense it consciously or subconsciously, they can tell the difference for those kind of things. Now here I see a sign up for 10% off your first purchase, and it's not clickable. So like, great, 10% off my first purchase. I love it. Sign me up. I can't click on that. So, you're promising something that you're not delivering on, which is going to disappoint people. Now, let's dive down. I'm going to go up and down and just float around a little bit because I have a lot of things on my mind after looking at your store. So we have this, catalog link, shop now link, and it takes me to a page where I can filter by availability and by price. I can sort it all different ways, but there's only one product. So what you could have here in your top nav, it could just be the mostly microgreens or whatever you're going to call this product. Just put a link straight to that product so people don't have to go through this secondary step that is not needed because your store is only one product, right? That's that advantage that you have. So we click onto the product, and absolutely awful image. Not as bad, but almost. And I'll explain why here in a minute. Worse. This literally looks like, well, let's first of all talk about your packaging. The packaging is very unprofessional. And that may be fine, right? Your brand may be, oh, dude, we're the low-cost option, right? We keep our overhead low and pass the savings on to you. Nothing wrong with that at all, if that's your brand, but you have not established that yet, right? So you're not explaining that to people. Like, if I saw something here, about we keep our costs low, and pass the savings on to you, then I would understand. But when you have a package that you buy off the shelf and then put your sticker on that package, that just, exemplifies small time, right? And, let's go to this one here. We actually just launched today their new packaging, right? And you can see, they have really nice packaging. They spent a ton of money and a ton of time and effort creating this packaging, and it shows. And same thing if we go to Bixby, right? They're doing packaged goods like you are. Let's just look at their bonbons. Here you can see they've got Bixby boxes, right? That they put their products in. And they've got all sorts of, interesting packaging that they've created, like their sardines come in these little tins and all that kind of stuff. And, these tins are actually, this tin chocolate is actually really successful and, and super expensive for 3 cans of them. But that can is such a novelty that people are willing to spend more money for it. You pull the can. Let's see if they have. Yeah, you pull the can open. There's a little chocolate fish inside kind of thing, right? So that people love, good quality packaging if that's part of your brand. I always want to, emphasize that. It's totally okay to have your packaging if your brand is going to focus on, hey, we're low production on purpose, which means you're going to appeal to a certain set of people and not appeal to another set of people. But the packaging, low budget, right? And I would guess that you're going to do better packaging, and this is just because you're new. Or it might be because this is how you're going to be for your brand value. Either one, right? Now, the reason I kept criticizing these photos is this literally looks like you took a package that you got from someplace, threw a sticker on it, and you threw it on the ground. Like literally threw it on the ground and then took a picture of it. And I can actually see people in the reflection. It looks like you're outdoors. That looks like the sky and a cloud. I might be wrong in that. Right? And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 photos of the same ugly package in the same setting that adds no, this, well, let me say it this way. Once I see this picture, nothing new is learned from this one, or this one. nothing new is learned, right? They do not add value. So if you only need one picture to sell your product, that's all you need, right? Normally you need more than one, right? But they need to be different. And right now you're showing a picture of the packaging, which is not what I'm going to be eating or putting in my body, right? There's no nutrition panel here. There's no explanation of how I use this product. And I also see no human beings, except for this person taking the photo reflected in the packaging, right? And that's like, this site is actually guilty of it also. Healing Home Foods. Let's see if I think we might have Shelly on. Yeah, nope. We need to put Shelly on the home page, right? There's no people on this home page, and we don't have lifestyle photography for this brand yet, and I'm working with them to get that. Let's take a look here, for example, Mulberry Park Silks. When I first started working with them like 6 years ago now, their homepage had 0 human beings on it. And now you see human, a whole bunch of human. They just did a photo shoot in New York. This is a photo shoot in Connecticut where they're headquartered at. So you got a bunch of humans there. They hired this woman and more, humans in their photos. And if we go up to the nav here, photos of people, remember, all these photos had no humans before. So now when you come to this website, it feels a lot more alive. It feels a lot more welcoming. It feels a lot more friendly because you see people. And because before it was just silk, right? And it didn't have any life or warmth to it. So as you evolve, you're definitely going to want to get some people in your photography. So the other photos I'd want to see here, if we were going to have more than one, because the packaging doesn't matter, right? You got to have one of the packaging, but you only need one. If you had nutrition panel on the back, I would just show. I'll actually show you here. We just did this the other day for Healing Home Foods because they rolled out new packaging, right? We have front and back side of the packaging, but what we also did is, because the nutrition panel is hard to read in this render, we took an image of just the nutrition panel, right, and showed that to them. And then you can see there's a lifestyle, not a lifestyle because there's no people in this one, but there's actually an image of so I can see what the crackers look like. The little see-through here, you can kind of see it, but this way you can get a better feel for the texture, even though they did a really bad job cropping the photo here. You can get a better feel for the texture that way. It's still, this is not a great quality image at all, but it's better than nothing that they had there before, right? And let's just look at Bixby, and let's just go to another one. Let's go to one of their snack bars and see what they have. They're probably going to be guilty of the same things that I'm saying, right? There's no photos of people in their products, but they probably have, let's see, that's the only photo they have for that one. All right, so that one's definitely lacking of, more photo. And we do that when you pick the 12-bar option. They could do with a photo of the chocolate out of the package, and they do that on a lot of theirs, just for whatever reason they didn't on this one. So you want to have, if you're going to, you want to show some more photography, which is not a bad thing to do, to just keep people engaged and learning more, right? Because they're still in their mindset, am I going to buy this or not? And if you don't give them enough to ponder on, they're just going to leave if they haven't, fully decided yet. So you could have some images of what the product looks like or how it's used. If this is a powder, do I put it in a smoothie or do I put it in a tea? Do I, sprinkle it on my whatever? You have to explain to people how they're going to use it. And, showing happy, healthy people doing that kind of stuff is also going to reinforce that, right? Why we're on the product, I already explained you need copy, right? You need text. You need to put lots of words down here that explains this stuff. You also want to start showing some social proof. So you could have, customer reviews. And like I said, I don't think you've sold anything yet, which is fine because you're new. But once you have, some sales coming through, you're going to want to have customer reviews on this page. And until then, you can put customer testimonials. So you could just put a little, section up here that shows someone's image, and you take a quote from them. And even if you have to fake that, until you have some real ones. Get your quotes from friends and family up there and their photos, just to have some content there, like I said, so that people can keep looking and considering while they're thinking about purchasing. Well, I'm going to just finish this page, this critique here. You don't need to show the vendor if it's just you for everything. I would get rid of that. Supplemental super powder. So I guess that's going to be the product name, not mostly Microgreens. Yeah, and going back to the color thing, right? This green, this red, right? These colors don't show up on your brand. We go back to here. Oh, I just closed it. Let's go back to Healing Home Foods. What you'll see, and let's actually go to their brand guidelines, right? So this is the brand guidelines that I built for them, which is this is their color palette. This is their typography, the fonts they're going to use. And then we show some, imagery and the way we like to do their imagery and all that kind of stuff. And what you'll see here is these colors, a lot of them, and these graphics, all of them, right, they match the packaging. So when you're on the website and then you buy the product and you open it up, it feels like, notice this green is the same as this green, right? These line drawings in the background, like this goji right here is this goji right here. This kale is this kale right here. This, tomato is this tomato. So we're being consistent with our packaging on the website, which makes the whole brand experience more cohesive, right? Because branding is super, super important. Especially in your space where, no offense, but like every Tom, Dick, and Harry is in the supplement space, right? So the ones that are going to be successful in that space are the ones that differentiate on their brand. And I'll give you a real example here with Rhino Power. They're a local San Diego company like you are, and they do all sorts of supplements. And they got started. Ryan, there's two Ryans at the company, but one of them is this guy here, Ryan. He was a motocross guy, and so they started off with just focusing on motocross people, and they broadened out to other performance athletes over time. As you can see here, they get into runners and women also, but a lot of it is the two-wheeled sports. And you boom, 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 right? There's the testimonials we were talking about. And then here's their customer reviews. And then the fun thing about this is, right, if we go to their customer reviews and we look at the photos right here, photos will come up here in a second. Yeah, let's look at them all. The customers themselves started doing this with their customer reviews. So instead of showing a photo of the product or them with the product, they started showing photos of themselves doing their amazing athletic things that they do, right? So this just gives such authenticity to the brand that is targeting performance athletes, especially motocross. When you go and look at their customer reviews, and their customers are all people flying through the air on their motorcycles, right? So, you couldn't, and, so this guy actually did put, the product in there, but you couldn't ask for better marketing here, or better connection between your target audience that you're trying to attack or address with your brand, and actually getting that audience on the website and showing it like this, right? Absolutely fantastic stuff. I don't know why it keeps repeating that one photo. I guess that guy just likes to put his photo up there. But this is just beautiful branding for them. But the point being, right, there are so many supplement companies out there that just being good or great in the ingredients is not going to be enough, in my humble opinion. If you prove me wrong, more than happy to see your success happen, right? But I have worked with lots and lots and lots of supplement companies, like probably 6 a year. And the ones that are successful are the ones that carve out a niche for themselves, that address an audience and talk to that audience in the most authentic way possible, right? And for you, you're gonna have to think about not that one. For you, you're gonna have to think about what is that audience that you're going after, what is your differentiator, and all that good stuff, and then focus on that audience and the message to them. What you're gonna want to have on this page, talk to that person. They need to see themselves in your imagery. So if you're targeting healthy athletes or healthy moms or aging in place seniors, whatever that target is, and that person, they want to see themselves on that page. And I'll take it even a step farther. Let's go to Charge Tech, where these guys, they sell these power devices that power up your laptops and your cell phones and all that kind of stuff for conferences and libraries and schools, right? They only have a handset of products. Let's go to their products, the charging lockers. There's not a ton of them, right? But what we did is we built this industry solutions page, and each one of these solutions, right? So if you look at the school one, right? I remember seeing that one recently. This one here, notice all the photography we have of their devices is in a school environment, right? So, and they didn't have photos for all this stuff when they began, and some of them are mock-ups and that kind of stuff. But if I'm a school administrator and I come, and I get an email from them, they take them to this page, the education page, so that the school people can see themselves in the photography, right? And then let's just go to like sports. Yeah, this one here. Let's see what it looks like. So, we got a sports photo. We show sports teams, right? Now, we don't have any photos in stadiums because they didn't have any photos when they were putting this together. But they're trying to make this authentic as possible for each one of these verticals. So if you have multiple customers you're going after with different value props with the same set of products, you're going to customize your message for each one of those scenarios, right? Let's just see what this one looks like. Yeah, I guess school is the one they spent the most time making the photography on. But different audience, different message, right? Even if it's the same product. And not that the message changes that much, by the way, but the point is you want that audience to see themselves in that page. So, I'm a 58-year-old person. I'm thinking more about, aging gracefully than I am about having the best sports performance of my life. So if I land on a page that talks to me about, how to be ripped and fly through the air with the greatest of ease with a motorcycle, I'm like, that's not me. Even though I could use their products, I'm not going to have as much affinity towards it. So in your marketing, right, which is what I've been harping on this whole time, you need to know who your audience is going to be, and then have that holistic, brand experience that you pull together, right? As we continue to critique this page, I would get rid of the shop pay promotion. It's a little custom code to do. I'm not a fan of the quick buy buttons, although they may work for your store. I definitely would not have share buttons. Nobody's used those since 2009, even though every theme still has them, right? So your product page needs to have, appropriate photography, show some life, show some social proof of people that have used the product and love the product. If you did that with videos over the current thing I showed you on, I think it was Rhino, where they had the testimonials, videos would be even better. That could look something like, let's just go here. I don't know if it's with and yeah, it is. There we go. So these guys sell a patch which helps you recover from sprains, right? But here, there's a video. Guy's going to talk about stuff, or his daughter. Another video, right? You cannot have enough video. Video is super important. So, getting some testimonials like that of your product would be absolutely fabulous. Another video, right? Tons of videos going on. All right, so that's that. Now, let's actually add this product to the cart and see what happens. So, there's no need to have that pop up and not take me straight to the cart in your store, right? Because you only have one product. So, I don't need to continue shopping. There's only one thing to buy. So, let's take them straight to the cart. We look at the cart. Nothing wrong here. I like hiding these, but it's a little bit of custom code to do it. You can add, you remove it. That's good. Now, I'm a first-time customer. I'm not seeing my 10% off, so there's not an auto discount happening for that. Now let's go to our checkout. Let's go back a step here. So this button is transparent background, right? This button is probably a 222 black. Let's see. 27282A black. So they're different colors. There's a lack of. What I like to do is I like to make the add to cart button and the checkout button and the pay now button all the brightest thing on the page. So it's obvious this is the one. You'll have other buttons for other reasons, but when it comes to buying stuff, make it a consistent color throughout and make it a bright dominant color. Now let's go to your checkout. All right, so you don't have branding up here, which doesn't surprise me. You've got this blue color here, and I bet you the pay button is going to be blue, and it is. So you haven't updated the colors here, and you can totally update the colors here to map to your brand. Like we talked about, having that brand and consistency across it. Doing that here on this page, just another one of those places where you can have that consistency. Let's just see if you have autocomplete turned on. Yep, you have autocomplete for address turned on. That's good. I don't know if you're opt-in by default because it already knows who I am. But I would want to make sure you have your checkbox turned on for email sign up. And that's in your checkout settings, in your Shopify admin under settings, under checkout. That's enough for this page. And also building out your shop pay presence, which is a whole separate UI thing. In your space might be a useful thing. Not the first priority, but something you could do early. Like you might start doing ads on Shop, by the way, as your first ads for your business. But your colors here aren't supporting your brand. So that's the checkout. Let's look at your footer. All right, you've got a privacy policy, but you're missing the terms of use, shipping policy, and return policy. So Shopify allows you to set up all four of those policies: terms, shipping, privacy, and terms, shipping, returns, privacy. There's the four. Allows you to do that. So you're going to want to make sure you set up all of those, because some people are going to want to know, what your shipping policy is or your return policy. So having a policy in the footer that talks about that is going to be great. Now, you have a contact up here. You don't have an FAQ. I would have an FAQ. And you're missing a super important page, and that is About Us. People want having an email address that is not part of your domain is very unprofessional, right? It just looks small time. And you're new at this, so it is small time. But you've got this domain, so you're going to want to go ahead and if this is your brand's domain, which I'm in question of, is this your brand domain, or is this your brand? Is this your brand? Mostly Microgreens, or is it Thrive Blends? Whichever one it is, you're going to want to make sure you have a domain that matches your brand, or as close to it as you can, right? And let me show you an example there, right? So I have a client, they started a store called Spellcrafter, but Spellcrafter was taken. So they took Shop Spellcrafter as their domain, right? That was the closest domain they could get to their brand of Spellcrafter. And you know how easy it is to go into GoDaddy. And let's just look at your Mostly Microgreens, right? Forget the .nets. MostlyMicrogreen.com is available. MostlyMicrogreens.shop. I prefer .coms. I have a few clients who do the .co, like that one. Yeah, so you got MostlyMicrogreens.com with the dash. If that was your brand, I would pick that domain up, right? In the 5 seconds I looked at what's going on here. And then what I would do is I would make sure that you get an email address with Google Workspace under that domain. So here it would say, info or support or hello or whatever at mostly-microgreens.com, and that way you look a lot more professional and legit, right? So I'm just looking here. So we're talking about the super important page you're missing, and that is the About Us. So small brands all try to, many small brands try to look large, and they try to look big and corporate. And my advice is embrace the small, right? Look, totally be fine being a small brand. I'll give you a real example here, right? So I am a one-person Shopify agency. And, I used to, not be so proud of that, right? Or in my marketing here. So if we go to About Jade Puma, right? Meet Scott Austin, because it's all about me. I'm Scott Austin, I'm the owner. This video just talks about me. There's photos of me, hanging out with, coaching kids and all that kind of stuff. Here's the first website I built in 1994. So I'm embracing my small, and there are people that come to me, they're like, oh, you're just a one-person agency. And I'm like, yeah. And if you don't like that, for whatever reasons, then move on, right? But, and then like a big brand should not use me because I don't have enough services and people doing different, unique services like for all their ads and all their social and that kind of stuff. They shouldn't come to me, but small brands definitely can come to me. So for you, the way I always explain this is your product, not your exact product, but maybe your exact product, but at least 1,000 competitors for your product are available today on Amazon. And if somebody's not on Amazon and they're on your website, it's because they don't want to buy from Jeff Bezos. They don't want billionaires getting their money. They want to buy from a small brand, right? So what I encourage people to do is to tell their story. So here, our story, we're gonna meet Shelly here and her husband who had cancer, her son Jackson who's on the spectrum, and they both had special dietary needs. So Shelly started making snacks for them that were super healthy, right? And she, it's a long story she goes through here and explains it all. And she also gets a lot of street cred when she starts talking about, different, product like the Norwalk juicer and, all the stuff she did kind of stuff. So, they're telling their story. If we go to Kate here, she tells her story where, her mom got cancer. And that got her thinking about having pure quality, traceable, sources in your chocolate and that kind of stuff. Here's their factory and all this fun stuff here, right? And then she even goes into another page about the whole process. So this page is about her and her mom. This page is about the process she goes through to make her chocolate, including her, going into Curacao and buying the chocolate. Local, she's what does she call it? Bean to bar chocolate process, right? So she explains all that here. So I think for most small brands, the personal story is truly valuable and unique. And no matter what that story is, you should be telling it, right? So, because right now, if you did everything else I've talked about so far and didn't have an about page, it would feel hollow, right? Because I'm like, is this some Chinese company selling crappy stuff and trying to poison me? The fact you're, here in America, super valuable, right? We want to put a Made in America, badge on the site. FDA approved and all those things. You saw the seals we had here for Healing Home Foods, right? All their good ones. We do the same thing for Bixby Chocolate. We don't have as many food ones on their homepage, if I remember correctly. It's more about Kate and being Maine and women. Oh, there's the USDA and some other ones. But we do the same thing on the product pages. We show those value props and reinforce them. So whatever your story is, like I bet you didn't get into this space because you weren't interested in health or quality or, no additives and all that stuff. So you want to tell that story. You also want to talk about, the 15, recipes you tried and how you're doing things in your kitchen till 2 o'clock in the morning and show photos of the good old days back then kind of stuff, right? That's fun stuff that people love. And here's the cool thing, right? when you tell your story about your brand, it gives your customers something to talk about. If you don't tell your story, they can't tell it to other people and repeat that story to them and get that word of mouth marketing that becomes so important. If you tell your story and have a story to tell, then people retell it and it becomes more memorable, and you start that word of mouth stuff that is absolutely beautiful in an e-commerce space. All right, so let's actually look at the contact page just to be thorough. Yeah, on the contact page, I like to, show more than just one contact method. I like to show a phone number, an email, social stuff. We're going to talk about social here in a second. And I also like to show a map. Like, we're in Santee, and if you're like working out of your house and you don't want to show your house, I would just put a map that shows the Santee zip code, right? You put it on a Google map with the Santee zip code so people can see where you're located, kind of thing. That you are in America, right? And I zoom that out, and it's going to be easier for you in Santee. I zoom that out so you can see an ocean, so people know where you are, kind of thing. So you could add a little bit of life here. Now, on your social, you've got a link here that goes to the Shopify Instagram account. Not the best experience. Once again, it makes you guys look really bad, right? But it's a new store. I bet you're going to fix that. Let's see if you have Instagram. Nope. Now, let's do a search on the internet for mostly microgreens. I just want to see if there's any other sort of presences. Oh, there is an Instagram. Let's see if it's you guys. Oh, it's mostly greens, not mostly microgreens. I'm going to assume that's not you guys. Mostly microgreens. Let's see what that is. Yeah, this is you guys. All right, this is more interesting. Look, I got photos. This looks interesting. This is how the stuff's made, right? You should be telling this story on your website. This is good. I love this. You might walk through the whole process. Like maybe you have a unique manufacturing process that is different for whatever reason. You want to tell that kind of stuff, right? You know what I think of those photos, though. But I like these, photos of it being made kind of stuff. You can definitely show that. Let's see if there's anything else here. No, it doesn't look like it's your stuff. All right, so there's a little bit of something there that you can leverage, but definitely telling that story, right? You want to tell that story because people are going to find it interesting, and people only retell interesting stories. They don't retell boring stories or no stories. So you want to have a story. Now before we talk about homepage, so you're going to want to use an email sign-up form. I didn't notice a pop-up, and maybe I clicked it away. Let's actually see if we open up a new browser here. Let's go to a incognito window and see what happens. Just want to see if we get a pop-up or not. Gonna click on a few pages. And it's not looking like you've got a pop-up set up. So that's a way you're going to collect email addresses. You're going to want a pop-up, right? It's a standard best practice. And that's where you do the sign up for 10% also to promote that. So now on the home page, right? What you want here, once you get your brand defined, you figure out what your logo is, your color palette, and all that stuff, you're going to want a You Are Here sign here, which is a photo, however you want it to be. I would show it the destination of what you are, right? And for me, the destination of what you are is probably health. I doubt it's performance. I think it's more health, but I might be wrong on that. But let's say your goal is good health. You're gonna want whatever your target audience is. Let's just assume right now it's 58-year-old men like me, right? You're going to want to show a good-looking, healthy, fit, active 58-year-old man next to, a 50-something woman who's fit and attractive and healthy, and they're smiling and living their best life. You don't even have to have your product in that. Be nice if you did, but you don't have to, right? Here's a store. I just made this banner yesterday, right? Palm Bells. They were having their launch event yesterday, right? So they sell this palm bell here. It's a cowbell and a pom-pom. This is a photo they took of their brother-in-law. They just launched this product yesterday. Of their brother-in-law last week at a football game. And here's all the moms that started the company. And they had 2 photos, right? So I went on stock for photography and got fanatical fans photos and added it to their banner of their 2 actual photos. But it totally sets a trend, sets a tone, right? Turn up the volume of your cheer, the fanatic accessory you didn't know existed, right? This is actually, I'm pretty proud of this one. This is actually pretty good, the text we got here and that kind of stuff, right? So what you want to do for you, right? I said this is a "you are here" sign. You want to establish the destination your product brings. It's not about your product. It's about why people are going to buy your product. What your product is just a means towards an end. What is that end? And that's the end you want to show here, right? I'll show you another one, supplement one, Moxie Bites. Been working with them for a couple months, and it's going slowly because they don't do the hard work. But they used to show their product lineup, a whole bunch of bottles, right? They just had a long row of bottles. And we're saying, oh, well, it's made for you. It's backed by science, rooted in nature since 2017, right? And they used to have product photos here, lineup of their immune support line, a lineup of their mood support line. And now we're showing humans instead, so this feels a lot more alive than the page they had before, more welcoming and inviting. Now, we have gotten feedback, and it was totally valid, where, someone said, what are you guys, selling backpacks? Like, yeah, fair point. Not the best photo, and we're working on getting better photography, right? But for you, that "you are here" sign is the means to the end with your target audience in that photo. And then the 1 or 2 lines, and 7 words or less, which is really hard to do, right? So, backed by science, rooted in nature, 6 words, right? Here, accelerate your Shopify business, 4 words. The finest chocolates, 3 words. Nutritious snacks, 2 words. Too many people try to explain too many things, like we're the ultimate creative, craft, organic, blah 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 blah. Like you gotta, constrain down because people just don't have the attention, right? We would love for them to listen to everything we have to say. Nobody has the time to do that. So you want to make it as crisp, as concise as possible. So your homepage starts off with that, right? Great health from blah, blah, blah. Then you might have, then I would put 3 testimonials in here, videos preferably. I love Mostly Microgreens. I love Thrive Blends, whatever the brand's going to be. And, I've been using it for 6 months, and I've noticed X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 right? That kind of stuff. And then you're going to want, I would probably put in some other social proof. And what I mean by that is your Instagram feed, which you probably don't have yet, but you should have one quickly. Let's just go back to, let's go to Palm Bells, who, like I said, they launched yesterday. And we added their Instagram feed, I think, on Friday, right here, right? So, let's see what this one is. Yeah, so they're just starting to make little videos. This is not high quality at all, right? But they're starting to figure that out and trying to get into that game. This one's actually a lot better. This is a Disney 10K they were at and had their little Palm Bell things at kind of stuff. So they're just starting to figure out how to do their marketing. But this Instagram feed shows life, right? It shows activity kind of thing. So you don't want an Instagram feed to have people go to your Instagram. You want an Instagram feed just to show life on your homepage. I would also think about for you what sort of, seals or logos or emblems, like, FDA, organic, USDA, all natural, no artificial, all those kind of things, and have those up there, because you really want to start setting the tone. This is what we do. People love us. We're safe. We're trusted, and we're an active, vibrant company, right? So those are the 4 things we just said, right? 1 was the "You Are Here" sign. 2 is testimonials. 3 is going to be the product seals, the value props, the USDA, GMO, all that stuff, and then the Instagram feed. And then in the middle of that, I would put "Buy your product now" right on this page. You don't have to take them to another page. You've only got one product. You could have just a "Buy Now" button there. Your theme probably has that. And then if they want to see more detail, because the "Buy Now" is just going to have the main image and the price kind of stuff. You could also have them "Learn More" button, where they can come to the product page and see all the information you're going to have in here, the different photography and videos and testimonials and all that kind of stuff. So that's, I think, enough of a summary of what I'm thinking about you need to do to take this to the next level. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for your time.